One of the biggest mistakes I see in taxable brokerage accounts is very simple. People try to turn them into income machines before they have let them become wealth machines. That is backwards. It is understandable. It is emotionally satisfying. It is also expensive. Most people love visible income. They like distributions. They like the feeling of being paid. They like looking at a fund and seeing money arrive. They like the story that says, "My portfolio is working for me now." I understand the appeal, but a taxable brokerage account is not the place where I want to satisfy that craving first. It is the place where I want to build tax-efficient choice. That is a more mature goal. It is also the more profitable one. A taxable account gives you freedom. You can add money whenever you want. You can use it before retirement. You can build assets outside the walls of workplace plans and tax-sheltered accounts. You can draw on it later with more flexibility than most people realize. That flexibility is valuable, which is exactly why I do not want to waste it chasing the wrong kind of income. The word taxable should slow an intelligent person down. It should force them to ask questions most investors skip. What kind of distributions will this fund create? How will those distributions be taxed? Would this same asset be better held in a traditional retirement account? Am I optimizing for what feels satisfying this quarter, or for what leaves me with the most after-tax wealth over the next 30 years? Those are the questions that matter. Most people ask easier ones. What pays the most? What looks smartest? What seems safer because it sends me cash? What can I brag about owning? What lets me feel that I have solved the income problem without ever having to make difficult decisions later? Those questions are emotionally understandable. They are structurally weak. I have been around markets long enough to know that human beings are always tempted by things that make reality feel simpler than it is. High yield ETF does that. A monthly distribution does that. A never sell, just live off the income story does that. A flashy options-based product does that. A big payout does that, but simplification is not the same thing as intelligence. A taxable brokerage account is one of the clearest places in the investing world where emotional simplification can quietly cost a fortune, because the tax code notices what the investor does not. It notices ordinary income. It notices realized gains. It notices unnecessary turnover. It notices the difference between holding a tax-efficient broad equity fund and holding something that sprays taxable cash, because it flatters your desire to feel productive. The account does not care what story you told yourself when you bought it. The account records outcomes. That is why I begin with this rule. A taxable brokerage account should be designed first for durable after-tax growth, and only second for optional income needs that actually belong there. That ordering matters. Growth first, income second, not because income is bad, because in taxable, the wrong kind of income can interrupt compounding in ways people underestimate. This is where broad index funds earn my respect. A broad S&P 500 fund is not exciting. That is one of its strengths. A total U.S. market fund is not designed to seduce the insecure investor with a dramatic promise. That too is a strength. These funds do not try to flatter the owner. They simply provide broad participation in productive business at low cost with relatively efficient structure. That matters in taxable. I want an asset that can sit there and quietly grow. I want something that does not require constant realization. I want something that does not generate unnecessary tax drag merely because it needs to feel busy. I want the account to be compounding, not performing. That distinction is very important to me. A performing account is trying to entertain the owner. A compounding account is trying to enrich them. Most people have never separated those two ideas. They think if the account feels active, it must be working. If distributions are arriving, it must be helping. If something complicated is happening, it must be sophisticated. That is how people become easy targets. Complexity is one of the easiest things to sell to an insecure investor. If the product sounds more advanced than a broad market fund, they assume it must be smarter. If it sends cash more often, they assume it must be more productive. It feels like they found a strategy most people have not discovered. They assume they are being clever. In taxable investing, cleverness is overrated. I would rather be durable than clever. I would rather be tax efficient than entertaining. I would rather own broad productive enterprise than spend years explaining why my specialized income product was supposed to work differently this time. This is why the first role in a taxable brokerage account, in my judgment, is almost always a broad U.S. equity core. An S&P 500 fund deserves serious respect. So does a total U.S. market fund. People love to create drama between the two. I do not. One is a little narrower, one is a little broader. Both are low cost, both represent large-scale exposure to the productive machinery of American enterprise. Both can be held with very little need for reinterpretation. Both can survive the investor's boredom better than products whose main value proposition is excitement. That matters. A taxable account must survive boredom. Most people think risk means market decline. That is only part of it. There is also behavioral risk. The risk that boredom will make you meddle, the risk that visible underperformance versus some hot trend will make you abandon the plan. The risk that the account's simplicity will make you feel understimulated and therefore susceptible to products that look richer and smarter than they really are. This is why I value boring cores. They leave less room for storytelling. They do not ask for performance art. They let the investor become what I actually want them to become, patient. Now, once the U.S. core is established, I want to widen the map. International diversification does not exist to flatter the owner. It exists to humble them. That is a worthy purpose. A broad ex-use or total international fund is not always the top performer. Fine, that is not its job. Its job is to reduce the arrogance of believing one national market deserves total loyalty forever. Its job is to give the portfolio more than one engine. Its job is to remind the investor that diversification is an admission of limited foresight. I respect that. A taxable brokerage account built for serious long-term wealth should contain some humility. The investor does not need to guess when international will shine. They only need to respect the role enough to own it sensibly. Now, let me turn back to the temptation that ruins so many taxable accounts: yield obsession. Yield is one of the easiest ways to confuse motion with progress. A person sees an ETF paying a high percentage and immediately imagines that they found a more adult version of investing. They feel like they have moved beyond waiting. They feel like they have unlocked a system. They feel like the broad market crowd is unsophisticated and that they, by contrast, understand how to make the portfolio work harder. That emotional progression happens very quickly, and it is often wrong. A taxable brokerage account is not improved merely because a fund distributes more cash. The cash has to be evaluated. What type of cash is it? How is it taxed? What upside did I sacrifice to get it? Would this same strategy make more sense inside an IRA or 401k? Am I actually solving a problem I have now? Or am I satisfying a craving to feel productive? These questions matter because distributions can lie. They can create the appearance of usefulness while quietly weakening the actual long-term objective. That is especially true when the distributions are taxed inefficiently or when the strategy generating them is capping future upside in exchange for present emotional relief. I do not want emotional relief from my taxable brokerage account. I want future options. That is the standard. People underestimate how important that distinction is. An income machine is trying to convert assets into current cash flow. A wealth machine is trying to convert time, discipline, and tax efficiency into future optionality. Those are different machines. If you are already retired or close to it, then yes, the income dimension becomes more relevant. Cash flow matters, withdrawals matter, tax coordination matters, life stage matters, But even then, I would rather think in terms of a total system than in terms of what pays the most. A taxable account later in life can support income intelligently. It can harvest gains strategically. It can work alongside traditional retirement accounts, Roth accounts, Social Security timing, and future required distributions. It can provide a cushion, a bridge, or a flexible source of liquidity. That is not the same as turning it into a yield shrine. This is why I reject the religion that says if a fund produces a big enough distribution, it must belong in taxable. Number-sum income belongs there. Some does not. The structure matters. The job matters. The account type matters. If I include a quality dividend or value-oriented equity sleeve in taxable, I want to understand exactly why. Not because I am seduced by yield, because I may want a different factor exposure, because qualified dividends may be acceptable, because the behavioral profile may help the owner hold more confidently, because the role complements the broader equity core instead of replacing it. That can be sensible. But again, the point is role clarity. A quality dividend fund is not there to make me feel like I have outgrown broad market investing. It is there to play a supporting role in a tax-aware structure. That is a very different relationship. Now let me speak about cash and near-cash tools, because people treat them too casually. Money in a taxable account is not always all meant for long-term equity compounding. Sometimes there is reserve capital, sometimes there is money for opportunity, sometimes there is short-term optionality. Fine, then I want that role handled sensibly too. A money market fund may be appropriate, a short duration treasury ETF may be appropriate. The tax treatment may differ, the intended time horizon matters, the state tax picture matters. A gain. This is not because I enjoy complication. It is because the account should know what each dollar is supposed to do. That is one of the most underrated differences between mature and immature investors. Immature investors ask what is best in general. Mature investors ask what is right for this role in this account at this stage of life with this tax structure and with this behavioral reality. That is the sort of thinking I trust. So if I were forced to reduce the taxable brokerage account to the ETF or fund roles I would most seriously consider holding for decades, I would keep returning to the same architecture. A broad S&P 500 role, a broad total U.S. market role, a broad international role, a carefully selected quality dividend or value role, a tax-aware cash or short duration treasury role when appropriate. Notice what I did not include. I did not include flashy covered call theater as a foundation. I did not include ordinary income, heavy yield products merely because the payouts look good. I did not include complexity for its own sake. I did not include funds whose main virtue is that they make the investor feel sophisticated or paid. That is deliberate. A taxable brokerage account should not be used to soothe insecurity. It should be used to build freedom. Freedom later, freedom after tax, freedom after decades, freedom after markets have scared you half to death 3 different times, freedom after your own boredom has repeatedly tempted you to tinker. That is what I want. This is why I say the best taxable account is not the one with the most visible output. It is the one with the strongest long-run conversion of capital into choice. Choice is the real product. Choice about work, choice about time, choice about when to realize gains, choice about whether to spend, hold, gift, or rebalance, choice about how much pressure the future can place on you. That is why I care so much about after-tax wealth instead of emotional reassurance. The emotional reassurance can be bought more cheaply elsewhere. The after-tax optionality cannot. No, let me say something very plainly. Most investors do not blow up taxable accounts because they lacked access to a broad market fund. They blow them up because they become impatient with sensible structure. They buy broad, low-cost exposure. Then they start to crave movement. Then they compare. Then they chase. then they add yield, then they add complexity, then they create taxable events, then they tell themselves they are being active and intelligent. Then years later they wonder why the account did not become what it could have become. The answer is simple. They asked the account to entertain them when it was trying to enrich them. That is one of the most expensive confusions in investing. If you are young, then this confusion can cost you scale. If you are in midlife, it can cost you flexibility. If you are older, it can cost you coordination and tax efficiency. At every stage, it costs something. This is why forever investing in taxable is not about choosing the ETF that looks strongest this year. It is about choosing what can quietly convert your patience into usable future wealth with the least unnecessary leakage. That is a very different standard. And once you adopt that standard, the world of taxable investing becomes much less glamorous and much more powerful. The fund that flatters you loses appeal. The fund that fits the role gains appeal. The high yield theater starts to look less like intelligence and more like a product built for emotional demand. The broad, boring structure begins to look noble again. That is the shift I want. Because noble investing is often the sort that needs the fewest excuses. If I had to say the whole thing in one final sentence, it would be this: a taxable brokerage account should not be built to make you feel paid today. It should be built to leave you with the most tax-efficient freedom tomorrow. And the investor who understands that will usually end up richer than the one still chasing visible income in the wrong place.